blood mixed with the Texas mud as the thunder rolled, masking the sound of a desperate woman's heavy breathing. She clutched the stolen infant to her chest, praying the shadows would hide them. She didn't expect a lone cowboy with a loaded Winchester to step out of the darkness. Rain lashed across the unforgiving landscape of San Saba County, tearing through the mesquite trees and turning the dry riverbeds into churning, violent torrents. Bo Montgomery pulled his dripping Stetson lower over his eyes, leaning into the neck of his Rowan gelding tracker. Lightning fractured the night sky, casting brief, blinding illumination over the jagged limestone ridges. Bo was a man accustomed to the harsh realities of the frontier, a solitary ranch hand who carried the quiet, dangerous aura of a man who had seen too much and spoken too little of it. He was miles from town, pushing toward a dilapidated line shack on the edge of the notorious Gallagher land to wait out the squall. He didn't expect company, not out here. Not in this biblical deluge. As Tracker crested the final ridge, Bo saw it a faint, flickering orange glow bleeding through the cracked wooden slats of the abandoned cabin. Bo dismounted smoothly, his boots sinking ankle-deep into the freezing mud. He drew his Colt 45 from its leather holster, shielding the cylinder from the rain with his heavy canvas duster. Outlaws frequently used these forgotten shacks, and Bo was in no mood to be ambushed. He crept toward the weathered door, the wind howling violently enough to mask the sound of his approach. Pressing his shoulder against the rotting timber, he kicked the door open, the revolver raised and steady. "Don't shoot," a voice screamed over the roar of the storm. Bo froze. The hammer of his Colt was pulled back, his finger hovering over the trigger, but the sight before him made his blood run cold. Huddled in the corner of the dusty, rat-infested room, illuminated by a dying lantern, was Josephine Cartwright. Josephine, or Josie, as the townsfolk called her, was the quiet, resilient seamstress from the mercantile in town. Bo knew her. In fact, he had spent the better part of the last year finding hollow excuses to buy canvas thread and new buttons just to catch a glimpse of her warm, amber eyes and the soft, fleeting smiles she offered him. But the woman before him now looked nothing like the composed lady behind the counter. Her auburn hair was plastered to her face. Her calico dress was soaked and stained with dark, heavy smears of blood, and she was trembling violently. More startling than the blood, however, was the bundled quilt clutched desperately to her chest. From within the thick wool, a fragile, high-pitched wail pierced the heavy silence of the room. Bo slowly lowered his revolver, uncocking the hammer, his eyes darting to the shadows before returning to her. "Josie, what in God's name are you doing out here? And whose blood is that?" Josie choked back a sob, tightening her grip on the bundle. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with a terror that cut straight through Bo's hardened exterior. "I had no choice, Bo. I had to run." Bo crossed the small room in 3 long strides, kneeling beside her. He reached out, his calloused, leather-gloved hands gently pulling back the edge of the quilt. A tiny face, red and screaming, was nestled inside. It was a newborn, barely a few weeks old. "Whose child is that, Josie?" Bo asked, his voice a low, demanding rumble. Tears spilled over Josie's dirt-streaked cheeks. "I couldn't leave her," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They were going to kill her, Bo. I saw it. I saw them murder Cora." Bo's jaw tightened. Cora Gallagher. The young, estranged wife of Hiram Gallagher, the wealthiest and most ruthless cattle baron in the territory. Hiram owned half the judges in Texas and commanded a small army of hired guns. Nobody crossed Hiram Gallagher and lived to talk about it. "Start from the beginning," Bo commanded gently, pulling a dry woolen blanket from his saddlebag and draping it over Josie's shivering shoulders. "Who did you see?" Josie took a shuddering breath, rocking the crying infant against her chest. "Cora came to my shop after hours. She was frantic. She said Hiram found out the truth about the baby." She paid me to help her pack, to help her secure a carriage out of town to Austin. But before we could even leave the back alley, Jasper Lynch found us. Beau's blood went to ice. Jasper Lynch was Hiram's chief enforcer, a cold-blooded killer known for leaving no witnesses. Jasper shot her, Jersey continued, her voice trembling so violently she could barely form the words. He shot Cora right there in the mud. I was hidden behind the loading barrels. Cora had thrust the baby into my arms just seconds before he rounded the corner. She looked right at me as she fell, Beau, her eyes. She begged me silently. When Jasper went to check her body, I ran. I ran into the brush, into the storm, and I didn't stop until I found this place. Beau stood up, pacing the small confines of the shack, his mind racing. If Jasper Lynch was involved, this wasn't just a domestic dispute. This was a hunt, and Hiram Gallagher wouldn't stop until the child was dead. Hiram must have found out the baby wasn't his, Beau muttered, running a hand through his damp, dark hair. He's a proud, vicious man. A bastard child would ruin his empire. Josie looked up, her expression shifting from fear to a strange, heart-breaking sorrow. Beau, she said softly, her voice barely carrying over the wind. Cora told me the truth before she died. She told me who the father was. Beau stopped pacing. Who? Josie pulled the blanket back a little further, exposing the baby's left shoulder. Right below the collarbone was a distinct, dark birthmark, shaped remarkably like a crescent moon. Beau's breath caught in his throat. He felt as though the floorboards had just dropped out from beneath him. He knew that birthmark. He saw it every time he and his younger brother went swimming in the Colorado River as boys. Elias, Beau whispered, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Cora and Elias were in love, Josie confirmed softly. Elias didn't die in a random stagecoach robbery 6 months ago, Beau. Hiram found out about the affair. Hiram had your brother murdered. And this little girl, she's Elias's daughter. She's your niece. The silence inside the cabin was suddenly deafening, heavier than the thunder that continued to rattle the rusted tin roof. Beau stared at the tiny, fragile life wrapped in the damp quilt. His brother's child. For 6 months, Beau had drowned his grief in cheap whiskey and back-breaking labor, haunted by the brutal, unsolved murder of his younger brother, Elias. The local sheriff, a man firmly deep in Hiram Gallagher's pockets, had written it off as a random bandit attack on the dusty road to Fort Worth. Now the truth stood before him, ugly and bathed in blood. Hiram Gallagher had ordered Elias's death, and now he was trying to erase the last remaining piece of him. A dangerous, simmering rage ignited in Beau's chest, but he forced it down. Anger would get them killed. Right now, he needed cold, calculating survival. He looked at Josie. She had risked everything, her livelihood, her safety, her very life for a child that wasn't hers, simply because it was the right thing to do. She had carried his brother's legacy through a tempest. Her name is Clara, Josie whispered, noticing the shift in Beau's eyes. Cora named her Clara. Beau knelt back down, taking Josie's hand. His rough, calloused fingers enveloped hers, offering a silent, steadfast promise. Jasper will be tracking you, Beau said, his tone shifting into the authoritative clip of the man preparing for war. The rain will wash out your footprints for now, but Jasper is a bloodhound. Once the sun rises, he'll find the broken brush and the mud trails. We can't stay here. Where do we go? Josie asked, her amber eyes searching his face for salvation. Hiram controls the stagecoaches, the telegram office, the law. We ride into the canyon, Beau decided instantly. Through the devil's backbone. It's rough country, treacherous for horses, but it's the only place Jasper won't be able to ride a full posse through. We'll make for the border towns, get to Judge Holden in El Paso. He's the only circuit judge who owes Gallagher nothing. Josie nodded, trusting him implicitly. She watched as Bo sprang into action. He quickly moved through the shack, gathering whatever meager supplies had been left behind by previous drifters: a rusted tin cup, a half-empty box of matches, and an old moth-eaten wool blanket. Dawn broke with a sullen grey light, the storm finally breaking into a steady, freezing drizzle. Bo brought Tracker to the door, helping Josie into the saddle before swinging up behind her. He wrapped his large arms around her and the baby, taking the reins. For the first time in his lonely life, Bo felt the acute, terrifying weight of having something to lose. Josie leaned back against his chest, her shivering slowly subsiding as she absorbed his body heat. "Hold on tight," Bo murmured, his breath warm against her ear. He spurred the gelding forward, plunging into the dense, rain-soaked wilderness. The journey through the Devil's Backbone was grueling. Towering limestone cliffs rose on either side of them, the narrow trail slick with mud and loose shale. For 2 days they rode in agonizing tension. They spoke in hushed tones, the shared danger stripping away the polite, formal barriers they had maintained in town. Josie learned of Bo's childhood, the fiercely loyal bond he shared with Elias, and the bitter loneliness that had consumed him since his brother's death. Bo in turn marveled at Josie's strength. When little Clara cried from hunger, Josie didn't panic. They managed to find a stray wild goat grazing near a limestone outcrop. Bo roped the animal, and together they managed to milk it into the rusted tin cup. Josie dipped a torn strip of clean cotton into the warm milk, letting the infant suckle the nourishment from the fabric. As Bo watched Josie cradle his niece, her face illuminated by the soft light of their hidden campfire, he realized he was looking at the most beautiful, courageous woman he had ever known. The quiet affection he had harbored for her in town was rapidly forging into a fierce, protective devotion. "You didn't have to do this, Josie," Bo said quietly on the second night, tossing another dry mesquite branch into the fire. "You could have turned away in that alley. No one would have blamed you." Josie looked up, her gaze steady. "I couldn't leave her, Bo. And knowing what I know now, knowing she's part of you." She paused, a soft blush coloring her cheeks. "I would do it all over again." Bo reached across the fire, brushing a stray lock of auburn hair behind her ear. The space between them seemed to vanish, the harsh reality of their surroundings melting away into the shared warmth of the moment. He leaned in, his lips inches from hers, the unspoken promise of a future hanging in the crisp night air. Crack! The deafening report of a high-powered rifle shattered the quiet night. A bullet violently struck the limestone boulder just inches from Bo's head, showering them in a spray of razor-sharp rock fragments. Bo instantly tackled Josie and the baby to the dirt, kicking dirt over the campfire to plunge them into total darkness. "They found us," Bo hissed, pulling his Winchester from the scabbard, his eyes scanning the pitch-black ridges above. A cruel, echoing laugh drifted down from the cliffs. "End of the line, Montgomery," the voice called out, dripping with malice. "It was Jasper Lynch. Pass up the woman and the bastard child, and I might just let you ride away with a bullet in your leg instead of your head." Bo checked the chamber of his rifle, his jaw set like granite. He glanced down at Josie, who was shielding Clara with her own body. "The time for running was over. You stay down," Bo whispered, his voice a lethal, deadly calm. "He doesn't know who he's hunting anymore." Dust and cordite stung Bo's nostrils as another high-caliber round slammed into the limestone overhang, sending a shower of sharp, white shrapnel raining down upon them. Jasper Lynch was situated somewhere on the treacherous upper ridges of the canyon, using the high ground and the pitch-black night to his advantage. The storm had passed, leaving behind a chilling, stagnant air that carried the metallic scent of fresh rain and impending death. Bo pressed his back flush against the cold rock face, his breathing slow and measured, a stark contrast to the rapid, terrifying thud of his own heart. Josie was huddled in a shallow depression in the rock wall just a few feet away, her body curled fiercely around little Clara. The baby, perhaps sensing the raw terror radiating from her protector, had mercifully stopped crying, whimpering softly into the damp wool of the quilt. "I know you're pinned like a rat, Montgomery." Jasper's voice echoed down the jagged ravine, bouncing off the canyon walls so it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Hiram sends his regards. He wants you to know that after I put you in the dirt, I'm taking the seamstress back to San Saba. We're going to tell the sheriff you went mad, killed your brother's child, and kidnapped her. Hiram always ties up his loose ends." Bo's grip on his Winchester tightened until his knuckles turned bone white. It wasn't just an assassination anymore. It was a complete erasure of his family's honor. Hiram Gallagher intended to frame him for the very atrocities the cattle baron had committed. "Josie," Bo whispered, his voice barely carrying over the distance between them. He reached into his duster and pulled out his heavy Colt .45, sliding it across the slick mud until it bumped against her knee. "Take this. If you see him before I do, you pull the hammer back and you don't hesitate. You shoot for the center of his chest." Josie stared at the heavy iron weapon. She was a woman who made her living creating beautiful things with silk and thread, not taking lives. But as she looked down at the tiny, innocent face of Elias's daughter, a profound, unyielding, fierce resolve settled over her features. She picked up the revolver with trembling but determined hands, cocking the hammer back with a heavy metallic click. "Come back to us, Bo," she breathed, her amber eyes locking onto his in the darkness. Bo gave her a single definitive nod. He slipped away from the safety of the overhang, melding into the deep shadows of the canyon floor. He knew this terrain. Elias and he used to track mountain lions through the Devil's Backbone when they were just reckless boys. He knew that sound traveled deceptively here, and if Jasper was shouting from the East Ridge, his actual position was likely 100 yards further north, near the only game trail that offered a clear line of sight to the campfire. Moving with the silent, lethal grace of a hunting wolf, Bo scaled the slippery, shale-covered incline. His boots found imperceptible footholds in the rock. Every muscle in his back screamed in protest as he pulled himself up the sheer face, the memory of his brother's easy laughter fueling his ascent. He crested the ridge just as the moon broke through the thick, departing storm clouds, bathing the canyon in an ethereal, pale glow. There, kneeling behind a cluster of dead mesquite, was Jasper Lidge. The enforcer was peering through the iron sights of his Sharps rifle, his finger applying pressure to the trigger as he aimed at the very overhang where Josie was hiding. "Drop it, Jasper," Bo's voice rang out, cold and sharp as a butcher's blade. Jasper whirled around, his eyes widening in shock, but his reflexes were honed by years of bloody work. He swung the long barrel of the rifle toward Bo, pulling the trigger. The gun roared, spitting a blinding flash of fire. Bo felt the searing, white-hot kiss of the bullet as it grazed his left ribcage, tearing through his duster and flesh. He didn't flinch. He didn't stumble. Bo leveled his Winchester and fired from the hip. The lever-action rifle barked once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The first shot shattered Jasper's collarbone. The second struck him square in the ribs. The enforcer let out a choked gasp, dropping the rifle as he stumbled backward, his boots slipping on the loose, rain-slicked shale. He clawed desperately at the empty air, his eyes locking with Bo's for one final, terrified second before he tumbled backward over the precipice. A sickening thud echoed from the canyon floor below, followed by an absolute heavy silence. Bo stood at the edge of the cliff, the barrel of his rifle smoking in the cool night air. He pressed a hand to his bleeding side, his breath coming in ragged gasps. It was done. The immediate threat was neutralized, but Hiram Gallagher was still out there, sitting comfortably in his sprawling mansion, believing his dark secrets were safe. Bo climbed back down to the canyon floor, his side burning with a fiery agony. When he reached the overhang, Josie rushed to him, her hands frantically searching his coat until they came away stained with his blood. "You're shot," she gasped, her voice thick with panic, dropping the heavy Colt to press her shawl against his wound. "It's just a graze," Bo grunted, though the pain was making his vision swim. He looked down at her, seeing the raw devotion in her tear-streaked face. "Jasper is dead, but Hiram won't stop. We have to keep moving. We make for the Trans-Pecos region by sunrise." The journey across the Chihuahuan desert tested the very limits of their endurance. For 5 agonizing days they rode under a merciless, blistering sun, the landscape transforming from rocky hills into a vast, unforgiving ocean of dry scrub and blinding white salt flats. Bo's side burned with a persistent, gnawing infection, and his strength waned with every passing mile. Had it not been for Josie's unwavering spirit, he would have perished in the dust. She rationed their meager water supply, tended to his wound with crushed mesquite leaves, and kept little Clara quiet and shaded beneath the canvas duster. Through the suffering, the bond between Bo and Josie solidified into something unbreakable. In the quiet, desperately cold desert nights, they huddled together for warmth. Bo would watch Josie sing soft, impromptu lullabies to his niece, his heart aching with a profound, consuming love for the resilient woman who had saved his family's only remaining bloodline. Finally, the dusty, sprawling settlement of El Paso del Norte materialized on the horizon, sitting on the banks of the Rio Grande. It was a chaotic frontier hub of cattle rustlers, miners, and lawmen. Bo knew a simple circuit judge wouldn't be enough to take down a titan like Hiram Gallagher. He needed federal authority. They steered the exhausted Rowan Gelding toward the telegraph office, but a commotion near the customs house caught Bo's eye. A group of men wearing the unmistakable silver star of the Texas Rangers were gathered around a map. At their center stood a man of legendary repute, Captain John R. Hughes, a relentless, incorruptible lawman known throughout the territory for hunting down the most dangerous outlaws in the West. Bo practically fell from his saddle, clutching his bleeding side as he stumbled toward the Rangers. Josie followed closely behind, clutching Clara tightly. "Captain Hughes," Bo rasped, his voice cracked from dust and dehydration. The tall, imposing ranger turned, his hand instinctively resting on the pearl handle of his sidearm. He took in Bo's battered appearance, the blood-soaked coat, and the desperate woman behind him. "State your business, son. You look like you've ridden through hell and back." "Not a..." "My name is Bo Montgomery," Bo said, leaning against a wooden hitching post to stay upright. "And we brought you the only witness to a murder ordered by Hiram Gallagher." Captain Hughes' eyes narrowed instantly. Hughes had been trying to build a racketeering and murder case against the untouchable cattle baron for 3 years, but witnesses always had a habit of disappearing. "Come inside," Hughes ordered gruffly, ushering them into the secure customs office. For the next hour, Josie laid out the entire horrifying truth. She recounted the night in the alley, the murder of Cora Gallagher, Jasper Lynch's pursuit, and the revelation of the baby's true parentage. To seal her testimony, Josie carefully unwrapped little Clara, revealing the crescent moon birthmark on the child's shoulder, and handed Hughes a delicate gold locket she had pulled from Cora's dress the night she died. Inside the locket was a miniature portrait of Elias Montgomery, along with a secret, heartbreaking letter Cora had written, confessing her fear of her husband and her plan to escape with Elias's child. Captain Hughes read the letter, his jaw setting into a hard, unforgiving line. "Gallagher's arrogance has finally dug his grave," the ranger muttered. Before Hughes could dispatch a telegram to San Saba, the heavy wooden doors of the customs house burst open. Standing in the doorway, flanked by 3 heavily armed hired guns, was Hiram Gallagher himself. The cattle baron had taken a private train, predicting their route to the border. He wore a tailored suit, his face a mask of supreme, venomous confidence. "I'll be taking my wife's stolen property now, Captain," Hiram sneered, his eyes locking onto the bundle in Josie's arms. "And I'll be seeing this murderous ranch hand hang for kidnapping." Bo stepped in front of Josie, his hand hovering over his empty holster. He had given his Colt to Josie and lost his rifle in the canyon. He was unarmed, bleeding, and exhausted, but he stood like a fortress of stone. "You're not taking anything, Hiram," Bo said, his voice dropping to a deadly, reverberating register. "You murdered my brother. You murdered your wife. And your reign is over." Hiram laughed, a dry, humorless sound. He gestured to his hired guns. "Kill the cowboy. Take the child." But before a single gun could clear leather, the unmistakable, deafening click-clack of lever-action rifles filled the room. 6 Texas Rangers stepped from the shadows at the back offices, their weapons leveled directly at Hiram and his men. "Hiram Gallagher," Captain Hughes announced, stepping forward with handcuffs glinting in his hands. "By the authority of the state of Texas and the federal government, I'm placing you under arrest for the murders of Elias Montgomery and Cora Gallagher. If your boys even twitch, my men will cut them to ribbons." Hiram's arrogant sneer faltered, evaporating into pale, undeniable shock. He looked at the rifles, then at Bo, realizing for the first time in his life that his money could not buy his way out of this room. Slowly, defeatedly, Hiram raised his hands. As the Rangers hauled the furious, cursing cattle baron away, the suffocating tension that had gripped Bo for 6 months finally shattered. He collapsed against the wooden counter, his legs giving out. Josie was beside him in an instant, dropping to her knees. She wrapped her free arm around his neck, pulling his face down to hers. Right there in the dusty, sunlit office, surrounded by the smell of old paper and leather, Bo kissed her. It was a kiss born of survival, forged in the fires of a desperate flight, and sealed with the promise of a peaceful tomorrow. Months later, the thunder over the Texas plains was no longer a sound of terror, but a promise of rain for the crops. Bo stood on the porch of a modest, sturdy cabin he had built on a quiet stretch of land near the Colorado River. He watched as Josie sat in a rocking chair, softly singing to a now babbling, happy Clara. Bo smiled, realizing that the storm that had almost destroyed him had ultimately washed away his demons, leaving behind the family he was always meant to protect. Did Bo and Josie's brave journey through the unforgiving Texas frontier capture your heart? True love and justice can conquer the darkest storms and most ruthless outlaws. If you were captivated by this thrilling Wild West romance and want more gripping, real-life-inspired stories, please hit that like button right now. Share this video with friends and subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable tales of the American West today.